This is Michael Beach, and welcome to the third episode of the What Are You Doing podcast, where today I have the privilege of welcoming our guest, Ron Friedman, revenue acceleration and business operations expert. Ron is an executive who I've known for about a decade, and I've had the opportunity to work closely with him during that time. Ron's got over 4 decades of experience in the technical industry. He's been a chief operating officer at 5 different companies, both public and private, and his experience spans across software and services companies. His experience also spans across running American companies as well as running companies in Germany and Italy during his career. Frankly, I could go on, believe me, but in the interest of sticking to our time frame today, I'll simply say that we are fortunate to speak with Ron Friedman today. Welcome, Ron. Great to have you with us.
Hi, Michael. I feel fortunate to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You're very welcome. Well, Ron, let's dig right in. I know our audience can't wait to hear about some of your experience and your insights, and hopefully you've got a recommendation or two today. Ron, what exactly does a revenue acceleration and business operations expert do for his clients?
Well, really, I think, Michael, there's 2 things I would say from the 10,000 meter level that I do. One is I become the new best friend of the CEO of the company. And the second thing that I do is I hold up the mirror so that as an outside person, I'm giving objective view, untainted by any of the typical types of dynamics that go on between a CEO and the people with whom he works on a day-to-day basis. I'm free to be able to hold the mirror up and kind of call it as I see it based on the experience that I've had. So, new best friend and mirror holder.
Wow, fascinating. Sounds like a very valuable service that you provide to these companies. I've coached a few CEOs myself, and one of the things that they tell me frequently is that they really don't have an objective audience that they can just talk through things with. They have to constantly be on their guard because everybody's watching their every move and expecting perfection. So I get that you become their new best friend, and I think it's really cool that you hold up the mirror so that they get that objective outsider's viewpoint, and you help them to achieve clarity about what's going on in the business. Sounds wonderful. Ron, I've heard through the grapevine that for a time in your life, you actually lived on the water. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what it was like to be Captain Ron and be the admiral of your own little navy?
Yeah, that was a fun chapter of our lives for sure. By the time that I began doing that, I kind of left the corporate world back in the early 2000s and started my journey through the consulting and coaching world. But we got into boating. We live in Southwest Florida. We had gotten into boating when we first moved here. And we found over the years we were spending more time on our boat than we were in our house. And it just didn't make sense to maintain both, so we did the ultimate downsize. And if you could imagine going from a 5,000 square foot house to a 50-foot boat, literally overnight, that's what we did. And there was a period of adjustment. I was still working pretty much full time. It wasn't like we were out cruising 360
Mm-hmm. Okay.
days a year. So I worked from the boat. I had built an office in the boat. So it was separate and gave my wife some space. But it was just interesting going through that type of downsizing, having lived so many decades as the houses got bigger and the property was more vast, and all of a sudden you're living on a 50-foot boat that's 17 feet wide. It's quite a change, and it was actually a very good experience. It was a life-changing experience for sure. And even though it's been, I don't know, 15 years since we did it, or 10 years since we did it, A lot of the lessons we learned about what's important and what's not important
Sure.
really are during that period.
That sounds like a really cool lifestyle. And you shared with me some pictures one time about your office on the boat and so forth. So it seemed pretty cool. Well, Ron, tell me, at what point in your life or your career did you become interested in leadership?
Well, before I started my business career, after I graduated from school, I was in the Army, and I got into a leadership position there, not as an officer, but um, as a platoon guide and sergeant. So that was really my first taste of leadership, and was actually a good um, foundation from which to move once I did enter the business community. So I felt I was good at leading men and women, and that I had a lot of qualities that I was taught when I was in the service that I was able to uh, put into practice in the business community. And
Outstanding. And how did you become involved in helping businesses and CEOs to become better leaders?
well, for my business career, I started in the technical field at a computer services company that provided data processing services back in the day to other companies. And from there, I just grew in that organization. I had some good mentors and some good coaches along the way, and got into positions of ever increasing responsibility. Um, that company got sold to a larger company, so I got to spend some time in a bigger organization.
Okay.
That was very educational. That was also, it was like super grad school,
Sure.
moving from an entrepreneurial enterprise to a uh, American Stock Exchange company and running divisions within that company was a great experience. But all the way along, I had the chance to build and manage things, and that was really became my passion.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm delighted to hear a little bit of how you got into this line of work. And we're very fortunate that you did. So I have to imagine that a dynamic leader like yourself, Ron, probably has to invest in yourself to become a better leader. Is that a fair assumption?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay. Can you tell our listeners about what you've done to raise the level of your leadership game?
Well, early on, I realized that I wasn't as smart as I thought I was when I was in school, and was able to without completely damaging my ego, was able to take a position where I was subordinate to some pretty smart people. And what I saw there, Michael, was interesting because while these people were more experienced, older, um, perhaps in many cases even more formal education than I had had. At the end of the day, they really did pull their pant legs off one at a time. And as smart as they were and as experienced as they still made mistakes.
Sure.
And uh, it was what I saw what the really good ones did with the mistakes they made, how they were able to accept that, learn from it, not repeat it, so the skills that I have throughout my career focused on were things that allowed me to build on that and to become a leader. So um, realizing that I needed to constantly improve my interpersonal skills, my sales skills, my negotiating skills, my management skills, my ability to really listen to people, and to not dismiss things out of hand just because they were different than whatever preconceived idea I had. And you do that through not only being an observer of the people that you work with, but also to read the experiences of other people. And I've read and seen a tremendous amount of material from people that I really respected as to what they were able to do in their careers. So I've a business, if that's a fair summation.
So it sounds a little bit like you're a student of the human condition. You were exposed to these great leaders early in your corporate career. You learned a bit from watching them make a few mistakes and how they responded to those mistakes and turned them into accomplishments.
I think
Very
that's
cool.
a fair assessment, yeah.
All right, wonderful. Well, as you develop leaders in an organization, Ron, have you come to some conclusions about 2 or 3 changes that aspiring leaders can make to improve their leadership skills?
I believe so, Michael. I don't know if I could boil it down to 2 or 3, but there are certain data points that even someone that's, as you say, a grown person, someone that's maybe got more education and experience than you, there are certain things that are um, prevalent in the human being that you're working with that you can grow on. And it's just a matter of finding where those buttons are. I'm a big believer in skills. I don't believe there's anything like a born CEO or a born super salesperson or a born anything, um, born professional golfer. I don't believe that that's there. I think there's people that have certain innate abilities that they've were either born with or they've earned over the years. But the ones that really separate themselves from the pack are the ones that are willing to invest the time to build skills. Skills can be taught, and still skills can be practiced. And the more you practice any skill, the better you get at it. And athletics is always used in business as a comparative tool, but what happens between the white lines in an athletic event is only a small fraction of the time that the athlete puts in to his craft. And I've always felt that business people needed to follow that. That was a good roadmap for success. So just showing up and doing what you're capable of doing because of whatever God-given ability or experience you have isn't enough to truly reach your maximum potential. So I found that challenging people to improve their skills, to take a step back from the forest and look at the trees, to be a little bit more introspective and not realize that they always have to be the smartest person in the room, that they can surround themselves with people who augment, supplement who they are. That type of coaching to the companies that I've worked with as a consultant and a coach, but even before that, when I was in the corporate structure itself and realizing that that was a ticket to ride, to get people around me that were smarter than me, things that are not my specialty. For me, that's the type of things that I preach to aspiring leaders.
Wonderful advice. It's obvious that you believe that preparation for the game on the playing field is vital. Develop your skills and you'll become a great leader. Wonderful. So Ron, a lighter question for our audience. What's your favorite band?
Well, I'm a child of the 60s, okay?
Okay.
That ages me a little bit, but that is what I am.
Nothing wrong with that.
So I love rock and roll. I love country western.
Okay.
And I think if I had to boil it down to one favorite band, I would have to say the Rolling Stones.
Okay.
So.
And do they have a song that just gets your motor turning quickly?
You can't always get what you want.
Great song.
You might just get what you need.
Just a fantastic song. Yeah. I love that one as well. Good. You mentioned to me once that as you've gotten older, that Frank Sinatra's My Way has sort of some personal relevance for you. Can you walk us through that?
It really does, and I don't know if it's the lens in which I look through to see myself or it's real. Many of my people that are close to me think it's more real than fabricated. But that song really, as I've gotten older, resonates with me. It's who I believe I am. Um, not always perfect, but always self-assured, not always cocky, but smart enough to realize that if I worked hard, it would work out. I know that sounds very self-ingratiating, but I don't mean it to sound that way. But it really, if you just listen to the words to that song and where Frank was in his life when he recorded it,
Right.
and where I was when I really it started to resonate with me, I believe it's who I am.
Okay.
When the time comes and they play something in the place where I'm laid to rest, that would be a good song to play.
A great way of communicating what it's like to look back on a long life and a long career well lived, for sure. Have you noticed any particular obstacles or barriers that aspiring leaders tend to get slowed down by or may even get stuck in place?
Well, Michael, it's interesting. I had a feeling you were going to ask me that. Most of the companies that I've either been in a position to lead or have worked with as a consultant would be what most people would call small to medium sized companies. They would be
Okay.
technology companies in 10 to 30 or $40 million range, which means that usually the founder is still there, is still the one at the helm. And whether they came from a technical background, a financial background, a sales and marketing background, didn't matter. They were who they were, and they had built the company to that point. And the thing that I've noticed with many of them is that as they've gotten comfortable in their skin of being a CEO, they've also, for for human reasons, decided that they knew everything there was to know about their business, and in fact, they knew certain things very, very well, but there's other things, as I said in one of my earlier answers to a question of yours, that they could benefit from greatly if they supplemented their senior staff with people who were complementary to them in their skill sets. So one of the things I try to do with my clients today, while being respectful, is to remind them they don't have to always be the smartest person in the room. They really benefit to listen to other people, even if those people are subordinate to them or much more junior to them in experience, because there's a reason why they're there. So I find that it's important to just make my clients aware that it does get lonely at the top when you're running a 10 or 20 or $30 million company.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Typically, you're surrounded by people who helped you grow the business to that point. You've been successful, so you have a strong ego, and that's good. That's not bad, but that doesn't mean that you have to become so singular of mind that you're just not ready to listen to anyone else.
Great advice. Listening is so important. We've got time for a few more questions, Ron. I'm curious, what is the greatest leadership advice anyone has ever given you?
Yeah, it's funny. There's two things that pop to mind.
Okay.
One was something that my first boss taught me. I became sort of his project to build. Had the fortune to work with him for 10 years until we sold the company. And he taught me something that I've never forgotten. He's told me, when three people tell you you're drunk, lay down. And simplistic as that is, I
Mm-hmm.
know that's not, Jack Welch stuff and the type of stuff you read in textbooks and things, but it is so true that, if you got enough people telling you, maybe you ought to start listening and stop talking. So that was one piece of advice. The other thing that has always resonated with me, and the first person I heard say it was a congressman from Oklahoma named James Watt back in the day. And he said, integrity is doing the right thing when no one is watching. And that's always stuck with me too, because I've always prided myself on being honest and truthful and having great integrity in the way I dealt with people and situations, just as most successful people like to see themselves. But Watt's words always resonated in my ear, was doing the right thing when no one's watching. That's when you really get tested.
Very good advice for anybody that wants to demonstrate their character. Well, I think my final question for you today, Ron, is going to be this. I'm always thinking about those aspiring, emerging leaders who listen to our podcast, and I'm wondering what an accomplished person like you would recommend to them about investing in others to help those other people to develop and hone their own leadership abilities. Your thoughts?
So the gray-haired wisdom for the day, Michael, since you asked, is that what really matters at the end of the day is the legacy that you leave behind in people, not in what you've done. No matter how well you built a division or a department or a company, um, a year or two after you leave it, it will change. Sometime for the better, sometime for the worse, but it'll be different. That's not your legacy. Your legacy, I remind middle level managers and even first level managers, your legacy is what you leave behind in people. Did you help them to reach their optimal levels? Did you give them a path where they could be successful, not just under your tutelage, but long after you were gone? And that, for me, when I look back on the years that I've had in business, is really the thing that brings me the most pleasure. It's got nothing to do with the amount that the stock was worth when the company was sold and the number of employees and the revenues. All of that, it's important, but at the end of the day, it's not what matters. I've been fortunate enough to touch many, many people who have gone on to have great careers, and I hear from them, and I'll be candid with you and your audience. A lot of times I don't remember them when I hear from them. I have to really go back and search my mind. Who is the person? But the one thing they say that seems to be that resonates the most with me is that I'll always remember the time we had together. The things that I learned from you and from watching you helped me to become successful today. And if you can build a legacy like that, that will survive anything. And that, I know that's maybe a little bit softer than what you would like, as far as here's some business principles that the emerging leader should follow, blah, blah, blah. There's great stuff on that too, but it's the people.
I couldn't agree with you more. I like to remind people that there are three things that are most important in business: people, people, and people.
Amen, brother.
Yeah, if you get that right, you can mess up a lot of other things and still run a pretty successful organization. But if you don't get the people part of the business right, you have to execute like a master to get to 50-50. Well, this has been a great conversation, Ron. Appreciate you coming and sharing your thoughts and your insights with us. Listeners, that's our show for today. Oh, you're very welcome. We'll see you next time when our guest will be Brian Bell, a former Air Force squadron leader, and these days he's the inspirational CEO of Sports Engine, a fast growth technology firm in Minneapolis. Our thanks to Ron Friedman for his insights into how you too can become a great leader through developing your process and gaining practice. We'll see you next time on the What Are You Doing podcast. Thanks for joining us.